Next, we'll move on to student comments. We've got the school committee representatives. Look like we have Mina here tonight.
Oh, well, I'm here.
No, I'm sorry.
So in the Drama Guild, one acts have just started, fully student-led performances. We have 3 plays this year: Murder by the Book by Lauren Scott and Isabella Del Gianninis, Aliens versus Cheerleaders by Owen Thompson and Sabrina Casano, and a handwritten and directed play by Leah Harris and Hannah Lawrence, which is really exciting. And it's set to be Friday, April 26th. It's all gonna be in one night, like the judging and all that stuff, so you should definitely show up. And also, we recently had our Spanish Immersion Advisory Board meeting, which I saw that we were gonna discuss later in the agenda. But I just wanted to, I just wanted to throw out there that I'm gonna run my annual Vietnam table, and multicultural night is set for May 9th. So if anyone wanted to volunteer for anything like that, you could reach out to Megan Pike or me if you wanted to. And we could help set up a table.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. I guess next up, we've got Mr. Bill McGinnis and the Misco Hill volleyball team.
You guys can head over there, so everyone could see.
No, we're out of season. Yeah.
Sandy, you want to throw that up there?
Yes, sir.
I want to stand over here. Else.
So I have to tell you, we are in the process of doing a project-based learning, or PBL program, and I have to tell you, I wanted to do it in regard to an athletic forum, excuse me. I think that, you know, lots of times when we talk about athletics, life lessons are learned on the field, but we also take with us off the field. And when Mr. Cuomo started this kind of initiative at the school a couple of years ago, project-based learning, I started to think about it, and I said, well, this would be great. And I have a great group of young ladies here that are a part of it. And it's something takes a long, we've been doing it all year long, and it's doing in little segments. And in the project-based learning program that we're doing, it has to do with these elements that are projected. Could you go to the next one? All right, so here are the elements for the project-based learning programs. And like I said, we decided to do it with volleyball. And there are a bunch of different, you could say, challenges or steps or elements that make it a project. And we're not through the whole thing, but I think once we're done, a lot of great experiences that these guys will have, and the way they look at learning and experiencing different things, it's just going to be a wonderful experience throughout their whole year. So I made some notes on some of these. One of the first elements is about, you know, challenging problems or having a question. We really didn't have that. All we had was a goal. We wanted to try to like maintain or enhance our volleyball program in the community. And we said, okay, well, where do we go from there? And that led us to the second one, which is sustained inquiry. And, you know, there's a lot that goes along with these different elements, but the way we looked at this one was pretty much, this is the how to kind of do the goal. And these guys were meeting during lunches. Lots of times they would say, do we really have to meet again during lunch? But, you know, they came, they worked at it, but what they're doing is really the planning stages of this PBL program. Okay, so it was from there to authenticity, and authenticity was how we connected these guys to the community. And they did some pretty exciting examples of this throughout the year thus far, and there's actually more coming. But one of the things that they did was they implemented a 2-day free clinic for all the kids at Misco last June. And you know, in trying to attain our goal, it really worked out well because we had over like 35 kids come to this clinic, and many of them joined the team this year. and they made the team. So it was really neat to see that they took place in that. I also did a clinic for Whitensville Christian that used to have a volleyball program, but they don't anymore, and they're trying to bring it back. So we brought some younger girls over, and these guys instituted, and Sam, there's a video there. This was, this is one of the things, but you click right to the video. This is the young ladies. I'm gonna introduce you in a little bit. Keep going, Sam, if you don't mind. One more. That's the clinic that they did. It's one more. Now, here's some actual footage from the clinic. You can change this. So here's the girls. The girls, like I said, they're really involved in working with the younger kids and showing them the drills and things. Then what they did, then what they did is they wanted to reach out more to the community. And they said, well, coach, can we do like a student faculty volleyball game? And we challenged them. And the day before the faculty game, when they came out, they practiced, and there's a little video about on them practicing with the teachers. And then the next day they're playing, but they also, which led into the next element of the program that had to do with like student voice. This is where they took ownership in it, which was actually really cool. They wanted to do some things with the community and wanted the community to know through this, this student faculty game that, let's do something for someone else, because that showcases them what leadership roles that they're playing, and also how they want to give back. So at the same time that we did the student faculty game, they actually, we had a food drive for Mendon-Upton. And what they did was, again, made adjustments along the way. So it's really neat to see where they were, what they were doing, and then with their voice and how to like plan or make adjustments. They said, well, let's make it a fun competition. So what they did is they put it out to all the home rooms to say, okay, if someone brings in the most amount of needs or necessities that are needed for the Mendon food pantry, we'll give you an ice cream social. So they did that, and Mrs. Shalady's class won it. So in May, you guys are going to sponsor that. But it was crucial for me, and for me looking back at this and as we're intertwined with this, is that these are kids that are doing something that they're very passionate about, but also they're giving back to others. And they're trying to like just spread everything about volleyball and how great it would be to be a part of. And where they're going with this is they have one more clinic with Next Step Sports Academy in the Chris Hatfield. These guys are going to run a 6-week clinic for the youth in our community now. And this is a really good way to kind of like for these guys to showcase who they are. And then, of course, tell the younger kids, number one, what it's like to be a part of a great program. And number two, learn about a game that you might be interested in and kind of like bring them along with the program. So I think to now they're really getting that part and they're getting their message across. And like I said, there's more of this program to go. The last two parts of the elements are the reflection. And one of them, Sam, if you don't mind, there's a reflection. There's an example of reflection. They all were asked to write something on the first clinic that they did. And a crucial part of the PBL program is that you get revisions, you get critiqued, and I gave them feedback on, I think, what they did well, and so did the Whitensville Christian coach. And then what happened was they go back to the drawing board. And what they do is they say, okay, now what we have here, what we did well, and what we need to work on is going to lead us into the next phase. And that's the clinic that's coming up in April. And they met with, which is a crucial step, is the critique and revision. Mrs. Webster was one of the, probably the most respected teachers in our district. She's a fifth grade teacher. She met with them and she went over their reflections and saw where they were, what they were doing. And they said, okay, so now it's important to know where you are, where are you going, and now it's time to take action. And that's where we are right now. The last thing that we wanted to do was, because the seventh element of this is to make it a gold stamp project. Well, after their project is over in April, or actually be in June, we'd like to come back and you can hear more from them. Their experiences, where they've gone with everything. Yes, you guys are gonna have to do a lot of the talking. But it's gonna be, and again, I think this experience in regards to learning and it being more authentic and deeper is something that they'll have. And it's not like when they take my class, okay, here's the 10 questions that you have to do about volleyball. This is something that they learn and it's ingrained and they really can approach different things. And this is, the real reason, I think about athletics. I've coached for a long time in the district and, been a part of some great programs, but, I really am here to teach kids life lessons on the field that they'll take with them off the field. And, that's what I think they'll really get from this project. So what I'd like for you to do now is, and I told them, I said, guys, you might have to answer a few questions. And I have a few questions for them, but any questions for me, by all means, go right ahead.
What do you guys think is sticking with you right now? What's the most rewarding part of the programs?
Go ahead.
When we do the clinic, like seeing the girls like become successful after what we taught them, it's a really good feeling.
Even though these are your future competitors.
Yes.
Anybody else? Like I said, guys, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just.
Excuse me, team, do you think the faculty and staff was going easy against you guys? That's why we got blown out of the faculty staff, student team.
No,
Student and teacher. Practice. You mean the detail? They're right there. This is the practice. It actually worked out pretty well. 7 or 8 of the teachers came out. We have 8 players. One is missing this evening. But she, we ran them through a practice, something that what they do. They were just working on passing air. We always did like, skills, linear skills, game like and game play. And I have to tell you too, these guys, they responded to this, they're doing a great job with it. There's gonna be more, glitches along the way, but the way they approach it and the way they're gonna attack it, I know they're gonna be successful. But I think it's important for you to meet them now. So you guys introduce yourself. Oh, the last thing I want to tell you about, they're pretty good too. They're 14 and old this year. All right, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sadie Daigle. I'm Danya Shawley. I'm Caitlin Board. I'm Kaden Dara. Maya Rupert. Liana Vasquez. I'm Ava Carden.
And Charlotte Leach is missing this evening. She's not feeling. But it's been an incredibly rewarding process for me too. As a teacher, like I said, just sometimes having to direct them a little bit, but then sometimes just stepping away and let them kind of, experience and do the things that they want. Sometimes things don't get done. And sometimes things, they surprise me, but like I said, along the way, it's really about the process and the feeling.
And I want to just take a moment to shout out Coach. I know we've had a number of faculty and staff members showcasing PBL projects with school committee, and that's been a huge focus here at MISCO. Coach is actually not part of the 70% that has been fully PBL 101 trained, but it's like that ripple effect of other faculty members hearing about projects and knowing, okay, what is the PBL special sauce? Like what can I take? Is there a design element that I can bring into what I'm doing either with my students or with my lessons. So every so often, coach would come up to me, he goes, all right, so what do we got about PBL? You know, reflection? Okay, yeah, I like that. And he would walk, and he would run with that. And he goes, okay, we've done reflection. What else can I do? What about critique and revision? We do like a little mini session. He goes, okay, who can I connect with? Mrs. Webster. All right, cool. So I just want to commend Coach for also like always striving to get the best for his students, for his teammates, you know, for his team. So I really appreciate that.
And lastly, like I said, yeah. These, you know, athletics is a classroom, there's so many things to be learned, and great things to be learned. And ladies, I look forward for the rest of the year. And I don't want to hear it the next time I say we have to have a meeting. Thank you very much.
Before you guys go, I have a quick
Oh, sure.
question. Yeah, just because I love seeing these opportunities where learning is happening outside of the classroom and seeing some of those principles applied in other areas. I think that's fantastic. You guys are 8th graders mostly,
Yes.
so I'm hoping that this is something that's going to continue on at the middle school. So is there a train the trainer kind of thing that's happening? Are you guys passing some of your skills and your projects down to the rising 8th graders so that this will continue to happen at the middle school?
Oh, one thing is I'm retiring next year. So I've had 31 years, it's
Wow.
not really to put me off the pasture, but
Congratulations.
there is a young lady at Miss Building, her and I have already talked
Mhm.
about, you know, how do you keep it going?
Mhm.
And she, you know, she'll be applying for the job and hopefully, you know, I'll definitely recommend her. But, we have wonderful kids in the athletic program and, you know, like I said, I remember saying, hey guys, I heard about this PBL initiative. I said, what do you think? And you don't have to do it. And 8 kids just said, yep, we'll do it. Let's do it. Let's learn about it. Let's go on with it. So it'll continue. Actually, Mrs. Webster also told these guys, you have the ground floor right now for a great DECA project. If you keep going with this and do some other things with it. So learning is just that.
Hey, we've got a great volleyball team in the high school. Looks
Yeah.
like you guys are gonna fill in the spots really quick.
Well, he's excited about that.
Yeah, that's good.
Right, thank you.
Fantastic, guys.
All right, thank you, guys. All right, so my apologies. In my haste earlier, I skipped over community comments, so we'll go back to that. Is there anybody in the room for community comments? Sam, anybody online raising their hand for comment?
I think Ross, so
I see no hands raised.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. All right, we'll turn it over to Dr. Collin for superintendent and administrator comments.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to give a couple brief updates, because I know we have a couple of presentations that we're going to want to dig into after this, but we, at the last meeting, we had, the school committee voted on the MSBA statement of interest, so I just wanted to let you know, because the deadline was March 1st, and we got it in on time, 2 days to spare, but just want to thank you for that support, and we likely won't hear anything until around, they say the timeline's around October. I don't know if we'll get into this first pipeline because of last year with accelerated repair, they put it on hold. So there's now 2 years backed up of people putting in for projects for it, but we're in. I think it's a very solid application for the Nipmuc roof, and we'll keep you posted when we get any information, but wanted to keep you updated on that. And tomorrow, we're looking forward to the PD day. Dr. Kirkpatrick and Ms. Terrell, where is she, and Colleen and Cheryl and District PD Committee, which work nonstop. This PD committee is just nonstop in conjunction with them, and also in conjunction with curricular leaders like throughout the district, have been putting together lots of strategies for outside PD coming in, but also internal, like vertical articulation. I shared with you, I don't know if I did in here, but let's see, my notes, it's on our website, so I can reshare it with you if you're interested, on our PD website to see all the wide range of offerings that they'll be providing. It's really incredible. When I went through and saw, once it was all updated, I wanted just so people in the community can hear the types of professional development that we are providing our teachers. One, and I won't name every single one of them, but amplifying UDL with EdTech. Some of that is linked to when Colleen talked about our ed tech. One of the grants that we received is related to some of the PD that we're able to offer. We have symptoms, diagnoses, and mental health struggles facing today's students as a session, using SEL data to set goals and monitor progress at all tiers of MTSS. We have Empowering Showcase, a workshop on promoting authentic learning. We have had a big focus on small group instruction. So we have integrating small group instruction into the classroom. It's another one. So those are some of the 2-hour sessions, some of the 1-hour sessions, and I didn't list all of them here, but some of them were related to the science of reading for pre-K to 2 teachers. We had a couple related to AI. So we have information literacy and AI, which I may have to pop into. We have reflection and project-based learning. So you could see all of the elements that they just talked about, the design elements for PBL. So what you'll do is dive into various elements once you get the overview to improve your projects with that. Formulate your success. That is related to how to use forms, Google Forms in different ways in the classroom. We have Desmos, which is our what we use for curricular resource at the middle school. Coding with littles, which sounds pretty fun, and collaborating to enhance K-8 science with Project Lead the Way. So just in looking at that, in addition to the vertical time that people will have together, I know that we're going to have some outstanding outcomes and learning as a result of tomorrow's day, which is a benefit of having, when we have the few of these full day professional development days, the result is the ability to have that vertical collaboration across the district and have some of our district curricular leaders and department chairs work collaboratively to design what they need as well. So thank you to the PD committee, to Cheryl and everyone else who's helping out on that. The third item I had was a Spanish Immersion Advisory Board, which was fresh on the mind of Hannah and I as we were just at the meetings together recently. But we, just as a reminder, if you're not familiar, we meet quarterly as an SI Advisory Board. So periodically, I like to give you some updates on that programming. And we recently had a Spanish Immersion Kindergarten Information Night in February. And we looked at some of the current SI numbers coming in for kindergarten. It's a little bit lower than what we've had in the previous year. So we're just keeping an eye on it. Right now, let's say we had a little over 10 that had fully committed to SI at each of the schools. But we had about 4 to 5 that were saying they're interested, they're not sure, so they're still in that range. So when we start this kindergarten enrollment process here, it continues through all the, as you know, all the way into like leading up to the school year. So with that, I wanted to give you an update on that as well. And we have the district's multicultural night. Originally, it was going to be the 16th of May, but then we realized we had a couple events going on and didn't want to conflict with that. So we moved it to May 9th, which Hannah also just talked about, which is awesome. And just contact Hannah because she ultimately is the best person in charge on that committee and along with all of the parents. So she does an awesome job getting volunteers and she's amazing. So I know you're right here, but I would say that if you were right here. But that's a good highlight. So it's a really incredible group of parents as well that are on this advisory board. We've highlighted some of the work that they've done, but they're in it and they're making things happen really quickly and it's awesome. And I just can't thank them enough for their leadership. It really takes a village to get a lot of this work done. So I just want to thank them for that. What I didn't put on the agenda that I just needed to share because it was so incredible is happening right now downstairs in the cafeteria. We have students for preparing for their DECA presentations, which they're heading out like Thursday or Friday this week. I wish I could quickly show you the pictures. This on my phone right now. I'll have it in a future presentation. It's a mock presentation right now. So I happen to be in walkthroughs at Nipmuc today and popped in and saw a couple of them practicing and looked at what they're preparing. But we have all of these community members and business members and leaders and providing feedback right downstairs, all across the entire cafeteria, so that you can see all the trifolds are up there and everyone's dressed up and we're practicing what they're going to be presenting and getting feedback. So when we talk about the idea of project-based learning, that showcasing, I mean, that's in essence what these type of DECA projects are like as well. And it's incredible what they're able to do. So I can't wait to have them come back. That's why Fallon isn't here. She's the one who told me about it. So I popped down to see her because she's preparing for that as well. So that's going on right now too. I think that was it for my quick updates on that. And if we could invite Cheryl to come on up. And it was a brief overview on the Student Opportunity Act plan, the SOA.
I'm not sure about this, but we might be one of the first districts to have this presentation. It's like, nice. I think a lot of districts are going to do it in upcoming weeks. The plan that I'm about to share with you is our version of something that every district across the Commonwealth is doing by requirement and is required to present at school committee and to have a vote on it ultimately.
Is this a thing this year or is it?
It's every 3 years,
3 years.
we've had to do this, and so I feel like they've increased the requirements because over 3 years ago, we didn't have, I don't recall us having to come forward, or we missed that requirement, but Cheryl's got the requirement this year, but this is the talk of the town of superintendents and assistant superintendents right now across the state, of how much that goes into the plan. So I do hope, I know you're about to talk, but I do hope you get an opportunity to read the plan that I shared with you that Cheryl put together, and it is it is outstanding. So I just need to say that publicly. It is, it's really well done and thought out. So she'll give you a couple highlights.
Well, and really, I think that the right way to start this is to say the work is happening, right? The Student Opportunity Act is about us basically taking our district strategic plan, diving deeper and looking at subgroups and trying to identify if there are disparities in achievement among subgroups, and then targeting and identifying subgroups so that we can provide evidence-based practices in an effort to try to reduce the disparities in subgroups. And so it is a requirement, and it's also good practice, and it's something that we've had on our radar since I've been here. And I think that one of the things that in reflecting on this presentation that it will come out is how aligned a lot of our work is, right? And how so many of the things that we've been talking about routinely actually are some of our main evidence-based strategies for doing just this and like focusing on some of the disparities. So thanks, Sam. So I just made this slide to kind of, highlight some of these points for you and for the public, that this is, it's related to the district improvement plan, but it's not, it's more specific because we're going to focus on subgroups. The plans ultimately are posted publicly. Will be a site on the web on DESE that will share it with folks. Start the time. And
We're ahead of time. You're good.
Don't worry, I already got one.
Yeah.
I'm trained well. It does require stakeholder engagement, and there's a whole bunch of engagement that's happened. And for us, I think it's really important. It's coming on the heels of a new strategic plan where we had folks engaging in the entire process in focus groups and in surveys. So there was a lot of ways of kind of getting stakeholder engagement. Just a couple of weeks ago, we met with the leadership team again. We kind of went through root cause analysis protocols against some of their additional ideas for this. I mentioned before, it's focused on subgroups, and I'm going to share that the subgroups that we identified in this plan are the same subgroups that we've been focusing on for the last couple of years through the same plan, and that's students with special needs and English learners. Students with special needs I'll share in a minute specifically, and the slides don't switch just yet though. And English learners, because I'm trying to make things brief, part of that is because of the increase that we've talked about in different presentations of English language learners, and and our resources and needs to kind of think differently about about models that will support them. It's focused on evidence-based practices. The state comes up with a palette of evidence-based practices, and they ask us to choose up to 3 of them, and I've highlighted them in this presentation. And it's, I see this as actually district level data inquiry completely. It's kind of like, we look at our data, we make observations, we say, why is this happening and what can we do to improve situation? And we put an action plan together and we take a look and we make sure that the action plan is working. So if you could switch now. This is one graphic that I'll share with you that kind of is embedded in the text of the plan itself. This is a graphic that shows essentially gaps between students with special needs and students who are not on special needs. This group is a little bit broader. It also includes students who are on 504s as well. But what I want to show here actually is this is one of the reasons why students with special needs are identified in our plan. But also you can see that the gap is moving closer, and that the growth, and that's the right-hand graph, is actually really close to, and the gaps are getting smaller there. So I think the graphic shows 2 things. 1, we're focused on the right place, and 2, we're making improvements with the things that we're already doing, some of which we're building on.
I'm sorry, what does SGP mean?
SGP is student growth percentile. So when I say growth, that's the metric effectively that we.
That's the cohort based thing that we've talked about.
That's
in the
exactly
past.
right, where you want to be 50 or over to basically close the gaps, basically.
Great.
Any other questions there?
What is that final number in 2023 for both those groups on the IEP at
You're
504?
asking me to read this.
Well, it's between 40 and 60. Are we over
Yeah,
50?
it's 48.
Okay.
48 for students with special needs and 50.1 for students who are not special needs.
Thank you.
Okay, and that's, I think, in the report as well. I think I pulled that right out. Can you switch now? So this is a slide that kind of encapsulates some of our plan. The 3 evidence-based practices that we called out as important to kind of closing the gaps and addressing disparities. We're implementing effective student support systems, supporting curriculum implementation, and training all staff in high leverage practices for students with diverse needs, including students with disabilities. Okay. And what I have in the bullets here are some of the things that are like the action steps that go along with the evidence-based practices that our district is focusing on. We've been focusing on implementation of formative common assessments, including the ones that we've acquired over the course of the last several years, like iReady would be considered a formative assessment. We will continue that work. That's one of my bullets for moving forward in the next 3 years, where we're planning on doing some more work in terms of professional learning and also identifying through the next column, our curriculum review cycles, common formative assessments that departments can use to keep their eye on disparities over the course of the year. We're in the process of implementing whole student reviews, which is a part of a student support system. But gosh, I was in 2 meetings today where we were talking about this, and the work is actually being driven by teachers. It is being received, I think, very well as we're growing it, where they're actually talking about what data they would really like to understand and see for students and how to kind of access it all together. We're really trying to help develop teacher-led inquiry, and that will be something that we focus on in the next 3 years as well, as we work with department chairs and department leaders to really understand what data inquiry is and to help kind of lead that work. We're developing systems that enable educators to access data. We've seen Open Architect, that's one of them, and other platforms that we support. And progress monitoring for goal development is something that has been a big focus for the student support Services Office this year, and will continue to be as we think about how to kind of implement the new IEP and set goals that can be easily monitored. So in the next column, support for curriculum implementation. We've done some great work with the DCAP, which we view as a living document, not just what's every 3 years. And we're looking to kind of work with that to kind of continue developing it, and so that when we get to 2025, it's that much more robust.
What's DCAP?
Is the district curriculum accommodation plan. And that is, again, something that every district in the Commonwealth produces. And I, having been in several, it's one that here I feel like is really held up by folks as something that's really important to our practice at tier 1, meaning for all kids. We've acquired curriculum resources in spades over the last several years, and most of our departments are very well situated with resources. We'll be continuing to work on acquiring high quality instructional materials for grades or subjects that we haven't been able to identify them for. And also we'll be working on curriculum implementation, and in the future, we're hoping to be able to lead learning walks that will be led by department leaders to kind of look and see how our curriculum is actually being implemented, so that can kind of help refine our curriculum review cycles and help us see how well the curriculum is taking root across within and across schools. I'll shift to the last column as I look at my time. We'll be training all staff in practices that are specifically focused on reducing disparities and addressing the diverse needs of kids. And we've been doing this. We've been focusing a lot on co-teaching, and we will continue to do that by building an instructional leadership program among teachers that can help really bring these practices into the classroom and provide teachers with the support for implementation. We do great professional learning, as we were just talking about, and we need to be able to help support it once we've had those PD sessions and help it be really well implemented in the classroom. So those are some of the highlights for our SOA. And the last slide is just kind of highlighting some of the what I consider outcomes that have come about during the last SOA plan that kind of plant the seeds for some of what we just shared, including data inquiry, which we've talked about. That's a picture of our DCAP, which we revised my first year here. The upper right-hand corner is a picture of our instructional partners meeting, and this group has been meeting regularly this year as a leadership structure, and the co-teaching professional development that we're doing. I think that, you know, what we've seen is that these are the right evidence-based practices for our district at this time. And what we need to do is we need to continue to build on them to be able to continue to reduce the disparities that we see.
How much is the EBP grant again?
Oh, yeah, how could I forget that? All right, yeah, I put a little note down there. Okay, this is interesting. So the Student Opportunity Act is unfunded for most districts, right? Okay, so we're required to make our plans and all of this costs money. Professional learning, high quality instructional materials, all of this costs money. And yet there's no funding, and except that they had a grant in 2023, which we applied for and received. I don't know if you remember that, but it was $150,000 for FY 23, 24, and then we'll apply for a continuation in FY 25. And so there are some of these things that we have, it was easy to write this plan for me because I was like, well, we just did this grant too. And all these plans that we're funding through it kind of fall out of this. So yeah, so we do actually have some funding for this because of that grant.
So how would you say that you're implying that we're ahead of the curve on this for many districts? How would you say that we're ahead of the curve? What makes us?
When I said that, I meant in terms of the timing of presenting this. That's what I meant, because
I can jump in. A great example is I had an assistant superintendent mentor session. So it's all like the most seasoned assistant superintendents in the state in this group. None of them have presented. They're all talking about it. All of their mentees or assistant superintendents are talking about how are we gonna get these SOAs plans done? And I'm like, I just read the best one I've ever read in my life, you know, yesterday you were there for, but that's essentially what I was thinking. But that's what she means. I mean, the fact that we're coming forward now at the beginning of March when it's due April 1st and are really doing a lot of these things that we're continuing. So we already have a good plan that we've been working on.
Yeah, it feels natural, you know, it feels like a continuation of good work and with the, you know, application and receipt of the grant last year where we had to do some hard thinking about this too. Just felt like we're prepared.
I mean, it was really funny because the last slide, my whole question leading up to this was, wow, this looks like an unfunded mandate. And then the answer, there's the grant.
For the most part, yeah.
That's a pretty good answer.
Although then when I say that, I say, why do we have to do the written plan and submit? And she says, well, we did get that grant. Oh, right. We did, you know, so we did receive some funding. But
I mean, the
yeah,
amount
not
figures
in
coming out.
compared to what other districts the ones that are receiving millions.
I mean, the amounts in the plan here are
Yeah,
In mind.
a lot more than that,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
So we're allocating a lot more resources to it than just the grant.
Which is also stuff that, you know, things that like, if I were teasing that out in the plan, like you've seen in our budget presentations, right? It's not, surprise, yeah.
No, but it's
Things
so
that
much
we'd be
fun.
Doing anyway, most of these things. Some of them.
not all though, right? We wouldn't have the funding for the instructional partners without the grant.
Well, and also
For
the
example,
tools and everything
you
that
know,
they're
that's
using
one
for like
example.
the MTSS is all stuff that we're implementing.
Mhm.
So it's cool to see all these plans kind of merge into one. That's really
And
cool.
now some of this provides some of the PD, right, to continue the learning or bringing it into the classroom a little bit more.
Awesome. That's a very thorough document. Just
Yeah,
scan
it's great.
through
You
it.
have to, there's a lot of great information. It's I recommend taking some time at some point.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And all of it's a natural extension of everything that's been shared with this group over the last few years anyway, with the in-depth student inquiry that's been happening. I imagine that all of the hard work that y'all are doing at the student class, school level made this easier for you to write because all the data was there. And I wonder if all school districts have it that easy.
I'm glad I don't have to find out.
Well, it'd be nice to know the comparison
Yeah.
for a variety of reasons
Yeah.
over the next 2 or 3 years.
Excellent. Thanks, Cheryl. Appreciate it. All right.
Oh, and you need to take a vote
Oh,
on that to approve the plan. So she can submit that.
Make a motion to approve the plan that Maureen just put forward, the response to the Student Opportunity Act for 2024.
I think it's 23 through 26.
24th and 20th.
24.
There you go.
No.
All right.
That's nice and clean. Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And it's one. Thank you again. All right, on to new business. We've got a couple of out-of-state field trip requests. But first, we've got Mr. Bisbee to talk about New England Institute of Technology field trip. Thank you.
I'm Mr. Bisbee, one of the high school educators here with Stefanos, who's going to introduce himself and what our requests.
My name is Stefanos. I am a senior student here at Mendon-Upton Regional High School. And I'm here today to ask for permission to be able to leave state to tour college, New England Institute of Tech. And we currently have 9 students that are willing to come with us and tour the school. I have myself toured this school last week, and it's a wonderful campus and offers a lot of trades. And the teachers there are really good at what they do, and they have and after researching the school, they have a really high for having students finding jobs after college. So I'm here to ask for permission to be able to go into another state and tour this college. So I strongly believe that students will benefit from this.
Some of the programs we'll see will include carpentry, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, and should time allow, we'll also see their auto mechanic operations. They're in Warwick, Rhode Island. These particular programs are in the Warwick, Rhode Island campus. So we requested the use of the district van, and I'm an approved driver to escort the group there and back. It will be within school hours. So they'll come up to school on their buses and go home on their buses.
Great. Sounds good. A motion to, or any other questions? Okay. All right, motion to approve.
I move that we approve the field trip request.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, folks.
Thank you all.
Good luck, have fun.
Thanks for coming, Stephanie.
Okay, up next, we've got Ms. Holloway to talk about Galapagos Islands field trip request.
Everyone.
Hello.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lauren Holloway. I'm an 8th grade science teacher at Misco Hill Middle School. I have been leading international trips for Misco since 2019. I've led 3 trips to the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador. We did a Grand Canyon, Bryce, and Zion National Park trip. And I did a trip over the summer for adults to it was Germany, France, and Switzerland. So planning ahead, looking at April 2025. I wanted to change it up a little bit instead of going back to the Amazon for a 4th time. We have an incredible trip planned to the Galapagos Islands. If you looked at the paperwork that I initially sent over, it was for a cruise. That trip sold out. We had a very excited group, but then a couple of weeks into the enrollment process, we found out that an internal error had been made with the operations department. And that the cost would be almost double what my group had been promised. So we were devastated, or I was devastated because I didn't tell the group right away because I wanted to make sure I had adequate solutions before I presented that information. So we worked very hard. Explorica is now part of World Strides, which is the largest student travel company, I believe, in the country, if not the world. They have offered us an upgraded trip, and it's sort of at the World Strides level as opposed to the Explorica product, which we have always been happy with, and I have no complaints. So we are now not going to be on a ship for the week. We will home base in Porto Ayora, which is on the Santa Cruz Island in the Galapagos Islands. We will be taking day trips to different islands such as North Seymour, Bartolome. We're also going to spend a couple nights on another one of the main islands, Isabella. We plan to hike and snorkel each day. So on land, we have the opportunity to see endemic species such as the giant Galapagos tortoises, blue and red-footed boobies, giant albatross. In the water, we can see anything from Galapagos penguins, which is the northernmost location of the penguin species, sea lions, incredible fish, sharks even. It's going to be an incredible trip. I have personally been to the islands 3 times. I am beyond excited to go back and share a very scientifically significant and magical place with another student group. If you're interested in numbers, we currently have 38 total enrollments, which is actually larger than where we were last year with the Amazon trip. We have 5 chaperones, 11 parents, so 16 adults in total. We have 22 total students, 14 boys and 8 girls.
Cool.
Share any questions?
I guess, so a couple questions.
Sure.
And the first one is, I think, a general question for this trip and other trips. Have people already signed up and started doing deposits and that kind of
Yes.
thing?
Yeah, trip is sold out. We've already begun fundraising. I don't know if that was gonna lead into your next question. But we're the opportunity is higher than the Amazon trips that we've led in the past. We want to make sure that this trip is accessible to as many people that want to go. We've held fundraiser this past weekend. And now sort of that things are settled and we know that we are, everyone rolled over into the new trip itinerary. We're gonna hit the ground running with other fundraising opportunities. Because between this year and next year, we've got a nice chunk of time.
Yeah.
To make it more affordable.
I think one of my comment was kind of for, I think all in, look at Dr. Cohen as well for this, for the international trips in the past. I think we should get the school committee involved a little earlier in the process.
Mhm.
Like, you know, maybe we can have an info session, but like as deposits, before deposits coming in, because I doubt we're gonna say no tonight, but heaven forbid we did,
Mhm.
you're well on the way
Right.
to prepare a trip. I think we should think about that, as kind of a governance in the future.
Can I
I would
Can I ask
certainly
a
agree with that.
question? Because you've done a number of them, how far in advance? So we're about a year out from this approval, but how far in advance for a trip like this do you start to get that initial interest that we would need to then project out to do that?
At least a year in advance, ideally, a year and a half. I mean, the further out you go, the more time you have to fundraise, the more, the payments are broken, the more the payments are smaller because it's spread over a longer period of time. You know, when I did the first Amazon trip and presented after the fact, I had a group of 80 the first time.
Wow.
Yeah, it was phenomenal.
It's a lot.
It was, and it was my first trip, but you know, it was an incredible experience. We had such a great time that based on that trip, you know, the community and the parents were so, the students were so excited that they're like, this needs to happen again. So the plan became to run it every other year. We launched and then COVID happened like a week later. So that trip got rescheduled and ran eventually. But we're sort of in this, running this trip particularly, or a trip to like an adventure destination every other year.
Okay. Questions from? The only other question I had is, do chaperones from Misco pay, or does that get included in the fee?
Misco chaperones do not pay the toll. No.
Okay.
It's covered by the company.
I remember last time I went on the Ecuador trip, the one that got rescheduled, which was awesome. Are there gonna be some of the volunteer opportunities that they had on the trip that we went on this one too? Cause like when we saw the kids and that was really fun.
Yeah, great question. Definitely. Whether it's bringing school supplies to a local school there, I have talked with Explore No World Strides about that, whether it's doing a beach cleanup. It's just gonna look a little different than where we were in mainland Ecuador. But that is and always been something that we've been committed to, is doing that community service piece when we're there.
I make my one last comment, and this is back to my first comments kind of broadly against all the trips, like, I think this is awesome, it's an awesome opportunity, these 22 students are gonna have a trip of a lifetime, I think this is a once in a lifetime trip that people save up to do kind of thing, this is really, really cool. You know, it does, from a school district standpoint, you know, we do have 10 substitute days that we'll have, 10 substitute teacher days. Well, you're taking 2 days out of school, the Thursday and Friday before the vacation week comes.
Friday's a half day.
Okay, so,
Yeah,
so like you get like 2 academic days.
okay.
Times 5 teachers is 10 substitute days. I don't know if we pay our substitutes half the price on half days or not, but I think that's something that we should just be aware of and have the ability to improve early. And you know, it would be, I get this is a long trip, it's halfway around the world, and so you are coming back on Saturday, but I just encourage us to align these as much as we can towards the school vacation week to avoid the additional costs as we're scraping by right now.
Understood, and I just know that it's been past practice with other trips, including the Mendon-Upton Italy trips. So that's something the district has done for a while.
It is, but I think I'm kind of making the point going forward that we're beating the heck out of Jay right now and other things and looking for everything. And the more we put these trips on top of the academic calendars, the more it costs the district. And you know, we've got I'm sure you have 100 students a day you see times 5 teachers, there's hundreds of students that'll have a substitute. And there's 22 students that'll go on a trip, and so there's an impact to these kind of things. I think that's just a fair point that we should think about going forward with this. Not saying against the trip, I'm not gonna vote no, I just think it's a comment for this trip and others that I'd like us to consider.
Certainly.
Excellent, all right, any other questions? Okay, so we have a motion,
Motion to approve the trip to the Galapagos in 2025.
Second.
all right, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous, great. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks,
Fun.
Larry.
Let us know how it is. All right, next up. We are on the first pass of the MURSD budget.
Hey, coming on up. All right. Hi, Jay.
It's been so long.
We spent a lot of time together this time of year. Oh. All right. If you recall at the last meeting and periodically, we do try to give you smaller updates on the budget. We also have the budget subcommittee meeting coming up on this Wednesday where we will share mostly the same presentation and then dive a little bit deeper and have additional conversations based off of whatever that comes out tonight. But if we go to the next slide there. Yeah, so thank you. We have main goals for tonight are to provide you and anyone who's watching just a brief overview of the district's budget development process when I get to the budget hearing presentation. So it'll be similar information and I'll go maybe a little bit more in depth at that evening. But secondly, we want to communicate the summary of our current budget priorities for the school district and what came into our conversations and how we're adapting some of our conversations with new information as we go throughout the process. But ultimately, we're giving you the first pass of where we are with the proposed budget. We will highlight, as we always do, the fixed and variable drivers that drive up the cost for our budget. We'll talk about some of the challenges we're still facing, some goals that we're looking at, and uncertainties that still remain. All right. As of today, we wanted to be very clear at the start of our presentation because we usually get to the bottom line at the end of the presentation. We want to begin with, yeah, thanks. So, and then we're going to walk you through how we arrived at this point throughout our presentation. But at our initial, as you know, we go through the process and we have the requests that come in, that I'll talk about that process in a minute, including the numerous new positions that people ask for at the different schools or district level. You can see the number there. From that number, we then approved, you can see our approved amount of $41,894,825. And that is only including one potential new position in the list, and that's for right now, it's designated for the Spanish immersion kindergarten. If we had enough, then we would have to have, two. Right now, we have enough numbers maybe to combine for one, and that'll be a decision-making point at some point based off of the numbers, but that is the one that's included in there. And, but what we'll talk about in the outline, and Jay will do a lot of that, is where our estimated revenue is at right now, leads us with the shortfall of a little bit over $1 million as of today. And if any of you are great at remembering past meetings and what we talked about, what was the shortfall at the last meeting? 900,000, 800, like 800,000. We'll also talk about what changed from a couple weeks ago to today, because it was within those 2 weeks that we had some changes occur. Right. Keep going. I keep going backwards too. All right. I always like to go back to, I'm the visual person on the team here. I always like to go to the visuals for those of us where that's helpful with the budget process. We've been working through, we prepare in September, we get our initial estimates and requests in November and December, we review, refine, and present it with all the presentations that I'll show you the dates and remind you in a minute. And then we start to prioritize, and then we are at this point just prior now in March. prior to the budget hearing. We typically either this week or the last week of February have this first pass of the budget, as we call it, where we're a little bit closer to what we might be looking at prior to heading into that hearing. Because one of our goals since I came on board was to really communicate and be transparent about the budget process in a way that's accessible for anyone at home, anyone who wants to come to any of our meetings, also for all of you who might not be at every budget subcommittee meeting, because I know that's only a few of us, so you can see and hear directly from the departments. That's why I scheduled for them to come in, and they're all linked on our website. But even though it always feels like this is the heaviest season of the budget because there's a lot of decision making and new information coming from the state, and we're getting healthcare numbers and a lot's going on. I always like to show this timeline to show that, and the other visual budgeting occurs. It is a year-round process, and you are never set. We could be making a decision today or have a thought today, and something's going to likely change tomorrow. So it's a very iterative process, and but we want to be transparent
Is that
with
on the website?
all of these. All of these links are, yeah, that's the original development timeline is, and then all of the links are on our website, all the presentations. So I just link them here.
Really cool chart to show on the website if you get the chance.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's.
Yeah. Well, this presentation will go up on the website too, so.
I just like the fact that it ends in March.
Yeah.
Okay, good time.
March.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Ends for you.
Yeah, right. Well,
There's a lot of
it hasn't always ended in March.
No, it does keep going, but it brings the point that we're at right now, so I can be clear. and
Just
transparent.
the aspect of understanding how the budget evolves and what steps you have to take even after March
Yeah,
is a valuable thing to show to the public.
yeah, so that's the purpose of this.
Yes, thank you.
And it's a good reminder for us as well, if we go to the next slide. So the guiding principles in the budget development process, the top two are the same ones that we had last year, and we changed the third one. I just mentioned we're trying to make sure that we have a collaborative with the towns and with one another, and transparent communications where it's out there, people know where we're at. We won't have, hopefully we'll have less people saying, hey, I never heard about this, or, I didn't know that information, or didn't have access. At least people had access. We always will have student-centered decision-making. That's at the core of what we do. And keeping what is in the best interest of all of our students' needs is always going to be at the forefront of our decision-making. When we have more challenging budget years, that brings about more challenges because we have to make harder choices, but it still remains in our decision-making. Last year, we talked a little bit more about what were we can meet some of our short-term needs and start to address our long-term needs. And we've been able to do that the last couple of years. When we talk about this year and kind of the shortfall and how we're going to try to make this budget work, it's more focused on maintaining those services that we have and trying to maintain these level services. But there may be some targeted needs that we still need to address. Next slide. Thank you. This is a similar chart to last year. I went through a budget prioritization process with the leadership team. What I've highlighted in green are what's new in this chart. So if you went back to last year's presentation, these are the few areas that have changed. When I worked with the group, we start at the top with the question, and this is the question that when we talk to the community and all of our stakeholders, we think about, and it's kind of this, I mentioned before, the benefits-based type of budgeting, like what benefits do our customers of our family, students, community members expect from our schools? That's kind of a question, because each community is expecting different things. So we have two communities, and what do they expect, and what do you as representatives all want? And then we talk about what resources are we able to provide these benefits with. So these are the driving questions. So when we think about that, first, we start with the financial considerations of the town, considerations of the two towns. We know that we have limited revenue from the two towns. We're always talking about how can we have sustainability and try to have as much stability for as long as we can, even knowing sometimes it can get unstable in these communities. we always will have the strategic goal alignment and feedback that we got from the community, and we try to get ongoing community input and goals. Around community expectations, what came out of last year, and we didn't do a renewed survey on this, like particular to this, but from our strategic planning that we went through, student safety and well-being, high quality instruction, college career, all of that's listed. So I didn't change that. If we were to do another community survey recently, then we could always update that. We updated our strategic goals with a new strategic plan. And so you can see our 4 objectives and priorities listed there. You know what they are, so I'm not going to go through them. Fixed cost mandated programming that also impact our budget and prioritization. Obviously, we have requirements with our student support service delivery. We have the continuation of some of our curriculum instructional resources that we need to continue. We have the need that we've talked about around technology infrastructure that we need to maintain, as well as devices for our students. And as we always bring up, we have operations that, even though we focus on teaching and learning, if we can't get them to school, they can't be here. If we don't have safe buildings, I mean, so that is on the periphery, but it's also essential to what we do. Some of the challenges for this year is the limited town revenue. We're starting to kind of hit this point where it's more challenging, as you see. We also we'll talk about the state aid reduction as of today. We have the increased fixed costs, and we have uncertainty because we're in the middle of the collective bargaining. So there's some uncertainty with that. Where you're trying to budget, but you don't know. We have all of the units going through that. So those are some of the impacts for this year. I'm gonna keep going. We have lots of slides. This is essentially the budget hierarchy that I had last year, but I just tried to clarify a little bit more. At the upper green line was closer or even a little bit higher in the last couple of years, where we always want to start with maintaining our level services, then address critical needs, put in our strategic investments, and then try to enhance our programs. What I added in on the right, just hopefully this provides clarity for people. We obviously want the level services, we address needs, but then we start to get strategic, and then we can get really competitive. So when we're talking about what is the competitive advantage our students can have, that's some of the programs where we talked about athletics and we want to invest a little bit more. That's when we get to be competitive. So we do some strategic investments at times. We all obviously have to hit our needs, but that's where we go. If we were to go below and just say, oh, let's give you exactly what you got last year, like a level budget, then that would be below the lowest line. That would be reduced services. So hopefully that is a good visual that will help to explain when we go through this process, talking to other people about it. The next slide, probably not complete. There's a lot more I can add in and will before the budget hearing, but just to give you a few ideas on new requests. The first column, we have the some of the requests for positions. The right-hand column, we have some of the level service needs-based or strategic and competitive requests that have been put in there. There's a lot more, so I do want to make sure before the hearing that I go back through all of the lines and make sure we're hitting all, so people are aware. I already talked about maintaining services with the SI teacher if we do have that need for class size. We have some of the resources listed there are resources that we need to continue, with math, and we have digital subscriptions that need to be renewed in a couple of areas and some resources. And then we have the needs-based. And so I'm not going to list them all out there. I think public, this is probably the first time some of you have seen maybe some of the requests that have come in. But some of the requests for teachers, those relate mostly to class size, of course, and addressing needs. If you recall, in one of the presentations, we were looking to expand the therapeutic supports. We started at the elementary last year and see if we could expand at the middle school, because as you know, some of the students are coming up, and then eventually at the high school if it's needed. And we had a need for tech support. We do not, clearly 100% can say we do not have enough tech support to support the number of devices that are in our district. We do the best we can, but we're not able to fully meet the needs. Even Sam can only be in so many places at once, right, Sam? Yeah. So they do an awesome job, but it's not enough hands and people to be everywhere at all times. And then some of the strategic competitive supports would be, it would help with scheduling with how we do the teaming and various supports and special ed. If we could add some positions at the middle school would really help out a lot. And also curriculum coordinators. I won't go deep into that. You've heard about it before. We are a mighty department of one with Cheryl, but that's all we have in comparison to some of the districts that would have numerous curricular supports as well. On the right-hand side, again, just, every year we have requests for music instruments to expand that. We can usually meet a little bit of the needs, but not all of them. Some of them are really expensive. We've talked about improved field management. We know we need to put investment there. And we talked about in the past the 200,000 that we needed to work into the budget for technology. We're able to do it last year. But there was a second 200,000 that we needed this year that we had to remove from the budget. So that's some strategic elements. To keep going.
While we're on
Yeah.
that page.
Sure.
So you said in the very first slide that, the second slide that, the estimated expenditures included only one new position. So is that just for the level services here and everything above that is kind of above the?
Yep. Yeah. So that's the only one. The only other one that we talked about, which falls into, if you organize it differently, like I do usually with mandatory services, is the English language teacher. We're reviewing those numbers, but we might be able to, we did use grant funding in the past to kind of bring an additional, but that's the other main one that we're looking at. And I would say that therapeutic support would be pretty high on my list. If there were ways when I say hitting targeted needs, I would look to say, how could we maybe make that happen to address those needs? So this isn't in stone, but it's definitely where we're at as of today. All right. This is pretty close to what we had last year. So when we think about and have conversations with the team, we want to make sure we have continued high quality programs instruction for students. We're still really heavily focused on developing out our multi-tiered systems of support, which we've already talked about a lot, so I won't go into that, and maintaining a lot of our strategic goals, which you hear a lot about project-based learning and the authentic opportunities that we're offering students. That when we have conversations as a team, this is at the core of a lot of those conversations as well.
So I would recommend that slide.
Mhm.
I don't know how you feel about this, maybe a different point of view, but I would
Yeah.
recommend that go up like it's slide 6 or 7. Because it's more closely oriented toward, especially slide 8. So having a general understanding what the objectives are, the thinking around
Let's
those.
start with the objectives before the process.
Yeah, that's the end.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
I'll try to remember that.
I agree.
Remind me on Wednesday. Make sure I do. I don't want to move the slides right now, but that's good advice. All right, so we're going to jump into the numbers now. So that's a little bit of background there. So if we go into the expenditure budget.
Sure.
And hand it over.
Alright, so the expenditures that we're gonna talk about are still with a gap. So just keep that in mind that these numbers basically represent that the gap still exists within the expenditure segment. This particular chart, these are the state accounting codes that they require us to report things under, and that's how our budget would break out for that. 54% for instruction, and you guys can read it yourselves. I don't have to read it to you. That's the state codes, and that's how it breaks out. If you go to the next slide, we kind of grouped it together into different categories. 76% of the budget goes toward the people that work here and the cost of employment. So, benefits, health insurance, Medicare taxes, anything related to having employees is in that 76%. Another 7% goes to out-of-district tuition and transportation for students. Another 5% goes to transportation to and from school. Another 6% goes to the building operations. And it leaves approximately 5% for instructional supplies. Now, those supplies include any textbooks, any curriculum, technology devices, all the things that are instructional in nature that make it work. And you can see there's a little bit left over, about 1% of the budget is athletics. And it says 0%, but there's I broke out a separate section for the student, SROs.
I have just a very quick comment. I went back and I looked at the budgets, the budget breakdowns and the categories that they split them out. Apparently it's updated in February 2024 on the state website.
The state function codes.
Yes, the function codes.
All right.
So there's administration, there's also school leadership, and they're split out, so it doesn't perfectly compare to what we do. However, we jumped from about the lowest 10th percentile in the state to about the lowest 12th percentile.
Oh,
So
okay, good to know.
just wanted you to know that.
Well, so these accounts.
Thanks, Sean.
You're welcome.
This particular slide, the one previous to that, those are based on the function codes from the chart of accounts that DESI gives us, and they have not changed those chart of accounts. They may have categorized it differently when they report
I
this
think
stuff.
it's the same, exactly the same.
All right. Drivers, things that we're looking at that are pushing the costs up, and most of these are fixed costs. Health insurance is a biggie. We had based the budget on 9% based on what we've done over the last 2 or 3 years. I was hoping we were going to get down to 6%. Harvard Pilgrim came forward to us last Friday with, well, we really like 13.98 because you're such a good customer. We would do 12.5%. That's another almost $200,000 that we didn't budget for. That is also not part of the gap that you saw, which was around 1.1 million. So right now, Harvard Pilgrim is looking for a 12.5% increase. Worcester Retirement is up another 10%, and you'll get some historical data on all of these in a couple of minutes here. Medicare taxes are up 62,000. Buildings and grounds are up about 87,000. That's just a result of things costing more and things needing to be repaired. Regular ed transportation is up around a little over 79,000. That's a contract that we're in. Technology supplies, this is the cost for MacBooks. We are replacing all the MacBooks are at end of lease. We have to put it, we have to get new ones. They're going to cost a little bit more. So that's what that is reflected in. If you look at some of the drivers as we look at it, one of our bigger drivers is going to be salaries, of course, because 76% of our budget goes toward employees. It's gone from about 21 million in 21 to a projected 24 million in 25. So that's about a $3 million increase over the last 5 years. I don't know if that's a 1-year increase. But that's kind of what's happened historically with salaries. Health insurance. You can see that from 21 to 22, we got a 0% rate increase. But then the last 2 years, we've been at 8% across the board. We're looking at 12.5 this year. So that's a substantial jump. If you look at it over that 5-year period, it's 28% increase in health insurance costs. I think we're not unique to this. I think a lot of districts are facing this, but it's all based on the amount of claims that we have. And again, it's not something we can necessarily control. Transportation, we're in a contract. You can see that generally it's about 3 to 4% is an increase. That big jump you see in FY24 was a new contract. All the transportation providers in the state were looking for additional costs just because of what they went through with the pandemic, difficulty of hiring drivers, they need to pay them more. Just the cost of running their business increased. So that's where that big jump came in last year, actually this current year. Worcester Retirement. It's going up between 8 and 10% a year and has for as long as I've been here, it seems. It looks like it's almost 30% in the last 5 years. Worcester Retirement is the retirement plan that anybody that's not in MTRS pays into. So teachers pay into MTRS, everybody else pays into Worcester Retirement.
Do we have a rate of growth for our MTRS?
No, because we don't pay that cost, the employees pay that cost. So I don't really, it's 11%, I think it's 9% and then a plus 2% over a certain amount. And that stays the same, so that's going to be based on your salary. So if salaries go up, they obviously take in more as well, because it's 11% of the salary.
Do you know the percentage of employees that are applicable to Worcester Retirement?
I do not. I know that there's probably 200 or so that are in MRTA itself. Most of the administrators are in MTRS as well, but that doesn't change. I mean, that probably adds another 10. So maybe 50-50.
Okay.
Something like that.
I mean, we could always, if you wanted the
Yeah.
number, we could go look it up.
Building maintenance, you can see that that's gone up quite a bit. Those big jumps in 22 and 23 are what we call water treatment systems. We've spent a lot of money putting treatment systems in at Clough and Nisco. DEP has required that. We did use some grants, but there's been a fairly substantial cost of bringing that equipment up to grade. Putting new equipment in. We just did some more work at Clough to replace things that were 25 years old that just needed to be replaced.
Those would be capital things, right?
Well, they're part of the operational budget though. They're not
But I
capital
mean,
expenditures.
But wouldn't you expect after you've made those investments to not be?
Yes, that would be the goal. We don't fund that budget in next year's budget, which is why you only see 6% for next year and you saw 1% for this year. But you had big jumps in those previous years.
I'm saying I would expect it to come back down after the two. No.
You still gotta operate the stuff, and you still gotta pay the building maintenance, costs continue to go up, things continue to break. You know, we dealt with water treatment, that was one major issue, but we have lots of other infrastructure issues that we're gonna have to look at, which is where the capital plan comes.
So with Matt's making a good point though, because those are sort of one-time costs.
So
for
sorry for that.
purchasing, yeah, go ahead.
So it's not the increase isn't the capital of putting in the treatment, it's the extra expenses of running the system.
No, those increases you see there, are putting the equipment in. I mean, we didn't have any other source of funding except operational funding. We did write grants that covered covered about 80,000 worth of the $200,000 that we spent on water treatment systems. But we had to pay the rest and we didn't have another source, so it came out of the operating budget.
Okay. but
I
that
get the
is-
point that
yeah.
you're making.
It was a
And we-
one-time.
And we would
expense.
have to go back into, well, but it's staying the same. I see what they're saying. We'd have to go back into the list to see what else we had to do that next year. It
Right.
might not be the water treatment system, but it's the paving that we had or the increase here, so that the list, like when we go in capital and say, what have we done in those various years? And I think the main point, but it's good when you ask questions, because if something seems unclear and how we're presenting the data, we don't want it to be unclear, because that's our goal is to be clear. So we can try to look into that to be clear the next time we present. But we definitely have the list of all the other, and we have the things we've done and the increased costs that are associated in the last 2 years, that the costs have gone up so much, so.
But that's a
I
really
think
good
that
point.
played in a lot,
Matt,
yeah.
thank you. That should be clear when we.
Part of the answer is just our newest buildings are now gonna be 25 years old, right?
It's almost like we have more things
Yeah,
breaking,
the only
they may be
house.
less.
Yeah.
You have a couple of big ones that were probably the main reason, but.
Yeah.
That's helpful though. Thank you.
All right, technology, same thing, devices are costing money, smart boards cost money, we had leases, the big jump that you see in 23 was switches. We had to put in 2 or 3 different, and we finance things that are built in as recurring costs going forward, but we had to replace some switches and some other servers and things. The 26% you see in 24 was the 200,000 we put in for iPads. That is also going to be a recurring cost going forward.
And the other thing to be really clear and maybe to emphasize, we want to emphasize is technology, it wasn't in our budget, right? All of the initial, so when it was lower in the beginning, all of those initial devices that we received were received through as many grants as we got related to COVID. We don't have grants to replace the devices. And now we're heading into the end of life of some of those devices. And that's why we put the 200,000 in to the budget. So because it is a utility, as we look at technology, we have to, continue to have that to maintain our level of services. But next year, even with some of these increased costs, we had to remove the 200,000 investment, that strategic investment that would make it so we would have enough moving forward. Does that explain the increase? Okay.
It's also, we've been running we used to call it one-to-one program for how many years we've been doing that? This is sort of
10 or 12.
by shoestring.
Yeah.
Well, we come up with ways.
A
to get
grant here, a
devices,
grant
but-
there, and then if you look, FY 2021 and then, we think about all the additional devices that have come in. And the needs that we've had since COVID. And also those costs, like when you talk to Joe and Colleen about the costs, are much higher on some of the, you know, what we put, like replacement for projectors or smart boards and all of that too, are going up.
All right, so let's go on to state revenue. The state that's helping us so much. So the bottom line, as of right now, we are gonna have a reduction in state aid for FY 25. Yes, that possibly is gonna change. We won't know that till July, but as it stands right now, the governor's budget has a reduction. This is sort of a summary of all those things. Chapter 70, we are a minimum district, as we have been for quite some time. We get $60 per student, which results in about $59,000. The big reduction here is transportation. The most recent data I've gotten from DESE is that the reimbursement rate right now for next year is around 60 to 65%, as opposed to almost 90% this year. The reason for that is the governor didn't fund regional transportation reimbursement in the budget as an increase. They basically level funded it, but everybody's costs go up, so they have less money to spend, so they reimburse less. Charter school is reimbursement we have to pay for students that choose to go to a charter school, so we get a tuition cost, that's part of our expenditure budget, we get some money back. Quite honestly, our tuition is about $340,000 and they give us $29,000 back. So we basically are putting the cost for students that choose to go to charter schools. Net result, a little bit of just about $150,000 is a reduction in state aid as of right now.
I think, Jay, it's always worth calling out too with the transportation piece, or correct me if I'm wrong with the statement, but it becomes another unfunded mandate, right? Because we're regional schools, we have to provide transportation. And
Yeah.
most of our schools that we could compare to in the area have the ability to charge for transportation, right? Grafton, I know does. But they mandate that, you know, we have transportation, they mandate that we can't charge for it, and then they don't fund us.
Correct.
And
So, truth be told, we could charge the students that live 1.5 miles from the school they attend, which is probably 100 kids in total. So we could charge for that, but the buses are going right by their house anyway. The amount of money we would raise, unless we're gonna charge them like $25,000 a year, are not gonna do much for us, so we have not gone that route. But yes, you're absolutely correct.
But it's a great compare though to, you know, some of our
Yes,
neighboring towns that
Right.
have an extra revenue stream.
right.
All of it is unfunded mandate, the charters as well.
Yeah.
For the towns, BVT charges them as well, so it's like, there's a lot of stuff that we have no control over.
All right, so state aid, if you look over the last 6 years, you can kind of see a little bit of a graph of where our state aid has grown, and the reality is that over the last 6 years, our state aid has only gone up by 540,000, which is a little under 4% cumulative over 6 years, not per year. You know, you can see it was a 0.25% 1 year, it was 1% 1 year, 2 years, 2%, and now we're down to a negative 1%. So the state is not coming to bail us out. And that's, you know, it's kind of like Larry Bird's not walking through the door again.
Okay, Rick.
Chapter 70 is another. I mean, you look at our chapter 70 over the last 6 years, we've had a total increase of 368,000, a little under 3%. But you can see these annual increases, you know, 0.5%, 1%, 1%, 0.5%. It's the state's not bailing us out in any way, shape, or form. And this is, you know, a little bit of historical data of where it's gone. On the local side, first of all, let's talk about the enrollment percentages. It comes up every year. Mendon has picked up a little bit enrollment this year, about 0.5% from the previous year. You can see it was pretty consistent over the last 4 or 5 years. Last year, Mendon went down, Upton went up a little. It's kind of come back to approximately where it was in previous years, not quite, but it has gone up a little bit. Now, local aid, I try to explain this and make it clear, but I don't know if I do explain, I don't know if it comes out clear or not. Local aid is calculated based on your total budget. You subtract all the predetermined numbers, which is state aid, any district money we put in, and the minimum contributions that the state determines. And then whatever that balance is left, that's divided by the enrollment percentage of each town. So it's not a lot of the budget that gets divided by enrollment. Most of it, MLC is not divided by enrollment. It's driven by a lot of other factors, mostly income of the towns, municipal factor growth, a lot of other things. So if you look at the two towns, go on to the next one. You've got the MLC and the remaining balance for Upton and for Mendon, and it kind of shows you what their amounts is that they're going to appropriate. You can see Upton's net increase for the year is 357,000. Upton is 500, or Mendon is 529,000. Now, that's based on the fact, I guess I should explain this a little bit. We met with Mendon a week ago during an overbreak. They,
And this was the other factor.
Right,
so
this is
in the
something that
last 2
changed.
weeks, the change.
Upton had given us a number and said we could fund, it was about 14,200,000, somewhere in there, which made their increase about $450,000. It made Mendon's increase $622,000. That's like 90% of the money they're having coming in as new money this year, and they just can't give us all their money. They have town government to run as well. Agreed to fund as a net increase, their increase in the minimum contribution that the state mandates. So 529,000 represents about 70% of their new money, and that's what they're willing to appropriate to the school district. But it reduces Upton's number because it has to stay in proportions. So that's where these numbers come out from. So local aid from Mendon, again, you can see their increase in the minimum contribution, their increase in transportation, it gets offset by a reduction in additional funds that they provide to us to come out to about a 5% increase for the town of Mendon. It's 529,000. If you look at their local assessments over the last 5 years, you can see that, it was 3%, but then it was 1%. It was less last year. It was a negative 2%. Now they're looking at a 5% increase. And that's on the Mendon side. On the Upton side, same thing. Minimum contributions going up. Transportation's going up, offset by the additional funding coming down a little bit to come out to a $357,000 increase. And you can see what their increases have been over the last 5 years as well. 7, 4, 0.5%, and now 2.5%, or a little bit more. Keep in mind the towns can't just automatically come up with new money any easier than we can, because they only get it by raising taxes, and they can't raise taxes unless voters say, yes, I want my taxes to go up.
So I think Jay just said the presentation thing. I think for both slide 32 and 34, we should put that KGAR formula on top, because it's hard to say, well, 7 to 4 to Z, like just in your head, you're trying to figure out what the annual growth is. I'd be curious to see, because I bet the towns are both going to come up very close to each other,
Yeah,
but they're going to have their lumps based on,
yeah.
enrollment and MLC and all
Okay.
that stuff. Yeah.
All right, so on the district side, E&D, we're looking to appropriate another $1 million into the FY25 budget. We have a shared position with Upton that they pick up 50% of that cost. We do transfer some money from revolving, but the net is that it's really level funded last year. You see a slight decrease. The bond premium is something we had that offset interest on the debt service. Debt service ends this year, so there's no bond premium left, and it's like $1,100. So for all purposes, it's level funded from the district side, at least at this point in time. So let's look at our undesignated fund balance, which is what makes up E&D, and you can kind of see over this, I went back almost 10 years. You can see we started out, we had a little over $1 million. We're projecting right now to be a little under $2 million next year, but again, we're talking about appropriating money out of that to help offset things. So it's going to get reduced more, but we historically have been in the $1 million to $1.3 million. That's about where E&D has been certified. Those big jumps you see in 22 and 23 and even 24 were just a result of the pandemic, quite honestly.
And our masterful budgeting.
Oh, okay.
Get that.
Okay, well, I don't say that part.
I'll say it is masterful budget.
But that's one source of additional revenue that we have. School choice account. 5 years ago, we were about 1.8 million. Based on what we're doing next year, if we put $1 million from school choice into the budget, we're going to be about 1.2 million. So that reduces that a little bit, but again, it's still a fairly good, reserve of money if you need to have reserves. And then this next slide kind of shows you our enrollment trend of choice. You can see that 10 years ago, we were 139 students. We're at 148 students choicing in. Choicing out, we're at 59. We're now down to 42. So the reality is choice makes us money, and if it's done strategically and correctly, you don't have to hire teachers because you have choice kids, because you spread them out amongst classrooms and you try to still maintain optimal class sizes.
How much variation do you think there's gonna be for the final numbers for 24?
Probably not a lot. I haven't seen, this is the most recent thing they put out, this was January. So I don't think there'll be a huge change between now and the end of June.
That's
Right,
pretty
yeah, I mean,
impressive.
so that if it. That it's pulled from January, so
Yeah.
they said, then that would have pulled from October 1.
Yeah.
So it could be maybe a 1 or 2, you know, there might be a couple of people might have gone out. So they do a March 1 certification as well, so we can see how the data changes, but it doesn't usually too much during that time.
It should
That's
result,
17, 18 kids over a, 6-7 year period.
yeah, it should result in putting, we appropriated $1 million out of school choice or this year. It should put at least 550,000 back in. So in essence, the reality is only 450,000 comes out of that account. And that's the trend that we want. We
Right.
want to try to keep it at that point.
It's really the delta you care about, right?
Yes.
And this has been the best delta in 7 or 8 years.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, it's doing really well. All right, if you look at our budget, source of revenue, that's what this is. Upton pays about 35%, Mendon pays 27%, the district puts in about 3%, the state funds about 35%. That's where those sources come from. And that's about it on the budget side. So it's not a great picture, that's for sure. So now closing the shortfall. Is that you or me?
Both of us, but I'll start with the bottom line. So to close the gap, now this is very obvious, but we're gonna lay out the different ways we can look to do this. We need to either increase our revenue or decrease costs and expenditures. I mean, that's the,
Budgeting 101.
when Jay always says budgeting's pretty easy, it's because of that. This, that's part of that, although of course a regional budget is pretty complicated. So let's begin with some brainstormed or some possible approaches to increasing revenue. One is to increase the use of one-time funds from our district emergency reserve. So, school choice, we could use a little bit more of that to get by this year. E&D, we can allocate more, but we all know and want to be very clear, especially, I know you all know, but especially with the public and others, that if we do that, we're aware that it's something, we're creating our own structural deficit and cliff ourselves. But it's something that we can do in order to try to help get through this year. So that's one option. We can go back to the remaining few revolving accounts and see, we've been allocating it all along the last couple of years, 150,000 out of that, to see if we want to allocate a little bit more out of that. We can reallocate grant funds where it's allowed. It's not always allowable, just so you know, for one-time or recurring operational costs. An example of that would be if we had in the budget, let's say a civics textbooks that we need to renew, and we get a civics grant and it qualifies for that. Then maybe that can cover a subscription for a year. So sometimes we've done that. It could help a little bit. All of us can continue to advocate with state officials for increasing state funding, especially when we talk about the regional reimbursements. Chapter, we're at the minimum right now with a 30 a student. Even if it goes up to 60 a student, that's more money that helps with increasing revenue for us. We continue to look at every grant opportunity to support our budgetary needs, our PD or any of the anything that we're doing. And something that we haven't done in a while, but we can always go back and review our district fees for facilities, student activities, etc. That's on the bottom of the list for a reason. I don't want to be going there, but that is a step that we will look at everything. Everything's on the table, and that would be one area we look at as well. For decreasing expenditures, right now we have close to a hiring freeze. What I mean by that is if there are some positions that we think we can maybe get by, now that we're at this point in the year, weren't be able to fill, then we won't fill them right now. However, there are positions that we have to fill, right? And need to do that. So it's not for all positions, but we're looking at those that are posted and if there's something that we can do a hiring freeze right now. One area that Jay will talk about is related to always looking at different ways to renegotiate our healthcare plan and see if, particularly like with Harvard Pilgrim, if there's another plan that can save us money. He'll speak to that in a second. We try not to ever defer any building maintenance, but that's something we can look at if there's something for a year or technology replacement, something that we can go, you know, kind of can we get by with that for one more year? We'll look at those. It's not ideal because if it breaks, you know, you need the funds to do that. Defer hiring of positions for future fiscal year. And so we're going to take a look. So let's say someone is leaving a position and it's vacated. We'll take a look to see if that's something that, you know, maybe, oh, I'm sorry, this one is maybe in 2 years, we can try to come forward to fill a position, but we might not fill it next year. That's what that one was. Reduce budgetary requests further. We're still going back line by line. So you saw that we already reduced it by a large amount. We're still going to go back and see what else we can reduce. We can look into possibly pre-purchasing some items for next year. Sometimes you can get that at a lower cost. That'll save us money if we have some funds to do that. Sometimes we can put a hold on purchasing right now to try to save some money that would then, you know, help us out with E&D to then help fund next year. And we could not fill any open or vacated positions if we're looking at staffing as well and see how we can move people around to get by. So that's the list that we came up with. I'm sure tomorrow, again, there'll be something else that we'll add into the list to try to reduce the shortfall and close it.
All right, healthcare. Just another comment just on all of this. The one thing that I think everybody's experiencing, us, you know, everybody in town, everybody, is that the cost of living is going up. It's more expensive to do just about anything right now, and it impacts everybody, including the taxpayers that fund state funding all the way across the board. It's something that we are all going to struggle with, I think, as we go forward. Health insurance. So as I said, Harvard Pilgrim right now wants a 12.5% increase. I had initially budgeted based on 9, and I actually thought I was going high on 9, but it creates an additional deficit that's not included in that. What you saw is our gap of about $150,000. We are exploring options to transition to what's called a self-funded plan through Harvard Pilgrim. What that means is that rather than just pay premiums and they cover the cost and tell you your loss ratio is too high, we in reality pay the cost of healthcare. And the margin of profit that Harvard Pilgrim gets stays in our pockets. Included in that is something called stopgap insurance, which covers those high catastrophic type claims so that you're protected against something that's really out of the network, so to speak. It operates on Harvard Pilgrim's network. It's owned by Harvard Pilgrim. It eliminates deductibles completely. It eliminates referrals for HMOs and PPOs. So that would be another savings if we could get people to transition from PPOs to HMOs, because there's no advantage of being on a PPO because you don't need referrals on an HMO anymore. That doesn't mean that they can't have the option of staying on a PPO, but they're just paying more money for nothing at that point. It includes nationwide coverage, so it covers you anywhere through United Healthcare, which works with Harvard Pilgrim. It covers you anywhere. Basically has the same coverage benefits. I'm still trying to get more information on exactly what that means, because that's always it's identical, but I want to know, is it really identical? And obviously we have to negotiate this with MRTA and everybody else before we can make this transition, but that's what we're looking at. It would still have an increase in our cost for healthcare from this year to next year, but it should be dramatically less, to the tune that we potentially could save between $500,000 and $600,000 of that gap could be taken care of just by making this kind of a transition.
This is really interesting, because this is also making these plans subject to the rebates come back to the cost for these plans, not for the
Correct.
healthcare plan. So it's actually, you're getting some of the benefit of a whole rebate
Right.
system that's going on there. with
Correct.
Drugs.
Lots of school districts have shifted to this plan. Many in the surrounding area have shifted to this plan, Franklin, Tri-County. Oh, I have the list, I don't have it memorized right now. There's several, like, there's at least 12 to 15 districts that have recently shifted to this. I called several of them. Nobody had anything negative to say about it. One place told me that the biggest issue they had was that the insurance card still says Harvard Pilgrim, and people didn't understand why it still said that because they thought it was different. But it doesn't. It's the same, you know, it's owned by Harvard Pilgrim. It's the same network of doctors that Harvard Pilgrim's network. So that is a plus for us because people are used to Harvard Pilgrim and used to the doctors, and nobody wants to make changes if they don't have to. So that's one option to help close the gap. And then I think these are just summaries again of kind of where we're at. You know, our budget is looking right now on the revenue side at an increase of $736,000. It's not a lot of money. It's a 1.8% increase. Our expenditures, you saw that at the beginning as well. We've got about a $1.1 million shortfall, actually 1.25 million if you put the health insurance piece in. And then
Just added in this, when I looked at last year's presentation, budget hearing, this was what we expect to see beyond FY '24, challenges to sustainability. So if you look at this list, I think most of it is a year later is true. You know, we're starting to see a lot of these increasing inflationary impact, facility. So this was a year ago that I wrote this, and I think it's important to, as we, you know, get through this budget, the next day, we're starting the budget for the next year and really, you know, heading towards much greater needs in the following year, fiscal year after as well, especially if we're required to use more of our, you know, one-time funds to get by.
So one of the things for the school committee was the organization, MASC, school committee organization. One of the things they said is that there's a lot of school districts that are exposed to the COVID grants, that they used it as operational funds, and therefore they're now getting it yanked from them. Do we have any exposure relative to that?
Very little. We were very smart about that. So
That should
we
be.
had, there were a lot of districts that used it for staff. And now have to decide if they're gonna cut those staff or new programs, or if they're going to, you know, bring them into the operational budget. And they're making different, you know, choices for different reasons, depending on the needs of the communities. The only position we put into one of those grants was that EL position that we phased in over the years into the budget, which we needed. The rest were more one-time use.
I just think that's a very good thing to point out, that we didn't do an irresponsible thing with all the COVID funds and we kept it under control.
Now, if we have to apply some of them to help this year's budget for operational costs, not one time, you know, then we know either way that the structural cliff is next year for us. We're lucky we've made it 2 more years. A lot of people had it last year. I haven't talked to a superintendent who is not dealing with a financial crisis this year. If I do, I'd love to meet them. But we are in a much better shape. I even, you know, like to say that than some of the other districts that I'm talking to right now.
Understood.
Yeah.
So if we can get that story somehow into the presentation that we show it.
Yeah, and one thing I didn't add into this presentation were the grants. So usually we do kind of a summary related to the grants as well, so we can talk about that.
But I mean, that's just a very positive thing that you can show in how we're being smart about our budget resources.
It's, I think it's good to hear. I mean, it's very much a business conversation, right? How are you doing against your competition? How are you doing against your peer group? How, you know?
Yeah.
And we should talk about that.
Because I heard that in flying colors, that was, everyone was complaining about that. It's their loss of all the COVID money.
Yeah, and some, I mean, we didn't receive a lot of money.
Right.
Every amount, so let's say in all 500,000, right? If you think about that ESSER funds over the couple of years, but our colleagues and peers received millions of dollars, right? And the only way you can spend millions of dollars is hiring staff. And so for us, that wasn't even really an option. It could have been a couple positions if we chose to do that. And so I think that's why they're in that situation as well. And the ones that received a lot more of the funds too, were a lot of the higher needs districts, and not all cases, but in a lot of cases. And they still have those needs. They didn't go away. A few things we did, we've swapped out. There are some tools that we might have purchased, and so we talk about the curriculum audit, we might have purchased, used for a couple of years, that we are not going to, where we're moving from the budget to kind of help with this as well.
It's just,
So we won't be
just to
maintaining
hammer it one
everything.
more time,
Yeah,
the rumor that goes around the state from
Yeah.
so many school districts having struggles with that kind of problem is that, oh, everybody's having that problem. We must be having it too. What we're doing now is making up for the mistakes that they made during COVID. And I want to make sure that we don't get hit with
No,
that snowball.
that's not us.
Okay,
At least we can say that's not.
I'd
That's
like to
not
think-
us.
I'd like to think that we did it
yes. I think you
financially
did.
responsible.
Yes.
We feel good about that. For sure.
That's where we are today.
All right.
Tomorrow will be another day.
Well, you have until Wednesday for the next update. So.
See what changes we have between
Yeah.
the next 4 days.
You know, two tomorrows.
Yeah.
All right.
Any other questions? Are we good?
Good, all right. Sounds the end of new business. All right, should we move on to school committee subcommittees? Jim,
Right on schedule,
what's that?
We're right on schedule.
Right, that's good. So Jim's not here, so, and we haven't had a capital planning meeting since the last school committee meeting, so we can move right along. Sean?
Well, thankfully, they've done my job for me.
Yeah.
There's really nothing more to talk.
Sean, could you just review everything for us?
No, we don't have to
Summarize that. 10,000.
Next meeting on March 7th, as you said, and we've got the open meeting happening this month as well,
Yeah, March 18th.
March 18th. So we've got a lot to talk about relative to budget. Just want to say one last time that things are changing very rapidly as more information comes in from the state in our budgeting process. And when we go through our deficits, we're gonna have to look at it again and again and again in cooperation with the towns.
Yeah, we should have said that. Both towns
yeah.
have been really, really cooperative and worked with us very collaboratively.
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like both towns are really chipping in and doing what
We've
they
had-
can to help us.
We've had representatives at our budget meetings from the select board of both towns. We've had conversations that directly impact their budget. They want to know exactly what we're talking about. So we've been very connected to the towns, both of them, which is
And their
in
goal.
stark contrast to the last time we had to go through.
We're trying to work really closely with them, right? And they also are meeting us and helping us as much as they can. The fact that we're getting what we can from Mendon this year, that's great, or what Upton originally said, oh, we can offer it.
It's very much appreciated.
Definitely helpful.
It's Mike Goddard has attended and Elena Brugos has attended a lot. So we've had a lot of representation from the Mendon side. I forgot the names of the people other than Paul, of course.
Yeah, and Joe weighed in too.
Yep. Thank you for that.
Vicky? Any policy updates?
Not really.
All right.
We have not met, so we've got a meeting scheduled for April
All right, since you've got the floor,
8th.
negotiations update.
Yeah, so our negotiations with MRDA are ongoing. We've had 5 meetings so far, and we have 3 meetings scheduled, 2 for this month on March 11th and the 25th, and then 1 so far for April on April 11th.
Thank you. All right, I don't have any other matters that we didn't anticipate by the committee within the 48 hours of the meeting posting. A couple of the future agenda items include continuation of the budget presentations in the SLE data review. So with that, I'm going to make a motion that we move to executive session. Motion to enter into executive session according to the exemption number 3 to discuss a strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or the litigating position of the public body and their chair declares. We will return to the open session only for the purpose of adjourning the meeting. A roll call vote is needed.
Second.
All in favor? Or wait a minute. Go ahead.
Matt Hagan, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Eric Brown, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Vicky Ludwigson, aye.
Okay, and we are moving to executive session at